We're doing structuralism and deconstructionism today, and we're going to tie it into Native American literature, as you know I try my best to do. Now, last time we were talking, we went through this, and I forgot to mention the 3 words that we can use that pretty much sums up what structuralism is for a structuralist literary critic. For them, they say patterns create meaning. And we're going to see this in literature. Let's use Harry Potter for an example. I've got my little notes here, which I took for you guys. I hate to stand up here and read, but bear with me because sometimes I trip over my tongue. Right? Right. All right, focus. Literary criticism, as we know, is the analysis and interpretation of literature, asking what a text means, how it works, and why it matters. I like that. That's a good definition. I stole that from AI, actually, but it's a nice boiled, bare bones definition. That's what I asked AI to do, because oftentimes we as professors, we get so high and mighty, we forget to think like normal people. We get way off into the stratosphere. Never mind, I'm starting to do it again. Now, for Harry Potter, the magical and muggle worlds are definitely binary opposites, are they not? Says here, remember, structuralists are always big on looking for those binary opposites. So we've got magical world, muggle world, Harry Potter, Riddle, Voldemort, that's his name. All that kind of stuff, you know, the things that are, it's either this or it's that. And again, for structuralists, truth is oftentimes found in archetypes, that word which we discussed before, the archetypal tree. If we close our eyes and think of a tree, we might see a deciduous tree, or maybe if you're from my neck of the woods, you'll see an evergreen, such as a pine, ponderosa pine. But tree, we're looking for an archetypal tree. That's where we're going to find our truth whenever we look for archetypes. In Harry Potter, Harry himself is the archetypal, unknowing, unprepared, clumsy hero, the chosen one. He does not know he's the chosen one. And if we compare that, you know, if you go online and you see these memes where they make fun of Harry Potter and say, oh, this is just a ripoff of Star Wars, because we know Luke Skywalker is sort of like the chosen one, or the son of the chosen one, and he doesn't know that he's destined to be the greatest Jedi ever, right? That's the same kind of idea. They're archetypes. Unknowing, unprepared, clumsy hero. Hermione Granger, on the other hand, is the nerdy, knowledgeable, bossy, but well-meaning one. It's almost like a typecast character. Albus Dumbledore is the wise, kind, old benefactor, like Obi-Wan Kenobi or Yoda.
Difficult to understand, is it not?
Never mind, focus. Now, so if we were to look at Harry Potter through the structuralist lens of history, we'd see that it repeats mythic structures that often appear in these kind of stories, just like Star Wars and the stories before. If you go back through old literature and stories of I don't know, Odin and the Norse mythology, and some native stories have similar plot lines. And again, structuralists are going to go crazy for that kind of stuff. It says here, so we see that here's a mythic structure. Orphan child, not knowing who he or she is, discovers his or her destiny, goes through a bunch of trials, gets stronger, and achieves success. Very similar to Star Wars, and similar to the way we as human beings tend to view the world in general. Structuralists, like I said before, are built around binaries: wizard, muggle, pure blood versus mudblood, good and evil. And respect to culture, well, Hogwarts itself has its own culture which mirrors social rules that we all kind of know about. But it does have its own rules, its own rituals, its own roles, but we can recognize them as readers. The style of Harry Potter follows conventional fantasy patterns and tropes that we all know and love. And finally, a structuralist might view the art of Harry Potter as a reinforcement of universal narrative codes. All right, so we're going to knock that off for a second. I'm going to bother you with deconstruction, which is one of my favorites. Why? It's because this is where we start getting into the native perspective. Deconstructionists are literary critics who argue that meaning breaks down. And you could probably already feel this coming when I was talking about universal tropes, because not all of us see things the same way, right? Gerald Vizenor, who I'm going to talk about in a minute, jumps on this and has a good time with it, and that's kind of related to what deconstructionists do. Deconstructionism, meaning breaks down. They say that the world is always changing, it's always shifting, and it's always unstable, so meaning, we can't always expect meaning. Let me back up for a second and explain a little bit about deconstructionism. Imagine, if you will, you are a little child, 7, 8 years old, and your father leaves his watch laying around, and you're curious to see how the thing works, or maybe his clock, or a little alarm clock is even better. This is the old days when that stupid little wind-up clock, tick, 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 and you're curious, and so you grab the clock and you borrow some of Dad's tools, and you open it up and you take it apart, and spring everywhere, and little gears and nuts and bolts, and you take the thing apart. That's what deconstructionists do. That's in a nutshell of what deconstructionists like to play. That word, Play, is important to them. Their idea is, we want to take literature apart and look at how it works, because every little itty bitty screw and every little itty bitty nut and the more you take it apart, the more cool stuff you discover, and they just have fun messing with literature and taking stuff apart. And in some respects, especially if you are Gerald Vizenor or a native deconstructionist, you like to make fun of the way we rely too much on our structures. Let's keep going. So for them, truth, a deconstructionist will say truth is constructed. It's never fixed and it's never final. This is why when Suyepi Washichu, non-native, says, well, this is our truth, and you natives are savages, and blah, 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 blah. And of course, a native is going to say, that's your truth. Our truth is totally different. I could think of examples, but we don't have enough time, you see. History, same thing. A deconstructionist is going to say, well, the stories that we tell ourselves are full of gaps and contradictions. An example, just the other day, yesterday I think it was. Yeah, it was yesterday. There was some politician on television. It was a woman, and she was complaining about a certain orange politician who we all know and love, saying, never in history has there ever been a president who defies the courts. And of course, you know Singingeagle, Native American, who knows a little bit about history. It was on YouTube. It was a YouTube news channel. And I posted Imagine that. I suppose we forgot about the Supreme Court has made its decision. Now let them enforce it. Does anybody know where that comes from? Extra points if you do. Right, that's an old historical quote. I might have misquoted it. Some people say it's actually Justice Marshall has made his decision or has rendered his decision. Now let him enforce it. Give you a hint. Has something to do with Indians. Never mind. Let's keep going. Hierarchies for a deconstructionist are built on shaking binaries, and they're meant to be questioned. So the whole idea of meaning for deconstructionists, they're going to say, well, imagine that you got a friend who sends you a big old box with, for Christmas, right? So you get this huge box, and UPS man brings it in, boom, and sets it on your front steps, and you bring it in, and you open it up, and there's a smaller box, and you open it up, and it's a smaller box, and you open it up, and it's a smaller box, and they just keep opening, smaller and smaller and smaller boxes. Deconstructionists will say that's kind of how meaning works. There's always a new box every time you open up, and it's always a smaller box, and oftentimes it's an infinite number of boxes. It gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Never mind, keep going. Culture is a mix of conflicting voices and interpretations. A deconstructionist will jump all over that. How about style? Well, style can undermine or contradict content. And art, well, the more you look at art, the more you realize that meaning unravels. Like taking apart your grandma's sweater that she knitted for you one Christmas. Let me see what we can do with Harry Potter with deconstruction. Can we deconstruct Harry Potter? Yes, we can. Notes. So, a deconstructionist would say that, well, we know that deconstructionists are pretty much in opposition to structuralists, right? So let me keep reading. It says here it's time to turn the Hogwarts castle upside down. And that concept of turning stuff upside down is key to any good deconstructionist. Again, they like to play and turn stuff upside down, take stuff apart. They often will use the term play in his or her analysis of literature and art. First, a deconstructionist will say that the entire concept of muggles versus wizards is blurred and unstable. Why? Well, wizards can marry muggles and they can produce children who might be magical, might not be magical. We've got squibs. Two muggles can produce magical children like Hermione Granger. And where do squibs come from? Well, two magical people might have produced a squib who is supposed to be magical, but for some reason, no magic. As for truth, well, it's constantly deferred. Nothing can ever mean just one thing. Same with Harry Potter. The Chamber of Secrets, and then we accuse Hagrid of opening the Chamber of Secrets, but it actually turns out to be Tom Riddle himself in the Horcrux of his diary. And I'm starting to get into this. I'm nerding out too much. Let's keep reading what it says here. Constantly deferred, nothing can ever mean just one thing. History, as you know, it's selective and self-serving. Just like the book by Bathilda Bagshot called Hogwarts, A History, which focuses on the history of Hogwarts to the exclusion of all else. It doesn't talk about the rest of England too much, or the world in general. Now, moving on to hierarchies themselves, for Harry Potter, the entire concepts of purebloods and muggleborns exposes a lot of contradictions and biases, so its meaning is subject for more scrutiny. There's a whole bunch of stuff that undermines the text of Harry Potter that are built into it. Again, deconstructionists love this kind of stuff. The same goes for culture, which is also full of contradictions. The golden trio, that is Harry, Hermione, and Ron are always breaking the rules, right? And there's even a room called the Room of Requirement, which is specially created magical room for people who break the rules and they want to hide their catastrophes that they've created. Never mind, let's keep reading. As for style and art in Harry Potter, well, they both undermine themselves. Remember, Harry Potter is supposed to be a book for children. But why are there so many adult themes? And meaning. Every meaning invites its opposite in Harry Potter. So for a good deconstructionist, nothing is solid, not even the bestseller, one of the all-time best-selling novels for children, Harry Potter. Now, how does this relate to native literature? Well, this is where we're going to move over to one of my heroes, Gerald Vizenor. I need a picture of him. There he is. He's like 90 years old now. Let's just type in Gerald Vizenor. Can I go backward? No, I got to go over here. Bear with me. How long have I been speaking? 16 minutes. I'm going to pull this over and I'm going to just type in Gerald Vizenor. Back. We just want to look at him and then I'm going to knock off and go to part 3. Here he is. He's 90 years old. I got to tell you a little bit about his life, who he is. He is a Chippewa. I think Turtle Mountain. Let me see. Check my lesson plans. Gerald Vizenor. No, White Earth, Ojibwe, and part Swedish as well. The story about him is he was when he was a little boy, like 2 years old, his father was murdered, and they never solved the murder. But his mother, who's a Swedish lady, took him to the res, and his father's grandparents helped her raise the kid on the res. Now, he got to see a lot of res life and a lot of the poverty and squalor and discrimination, so he was raised like an Indian pretty much. Age 15, he wanted to get off the res. He wanted to escape. So he lied to the recruiters, and he said, I'm 18. And they let him join the National Guard. I believe it Minnesota National Guard. And when he finished, he got out for a little while and he said, oh, this sucks, civilian life. And he went back in, and then he went to Japan, and he was part of the Japanese, the U.S. forces that occupied Japan after World War II. Then he got out on the GI Bill. He went to New York University and Harvard. Ooh, Harvard's in trouble right now. And the University of Minnesota. And then after he graduated, he taught at all these schools, Lake Forest College, Bemidji State University of Minnesota, Tianjin University, that's in China. University California at Santa Cruz, Berkeley, University of Oklahoma, and University of New Mexico. Ooh. I'm going to knock it off here because I talk too much. We'll pick it up in the last segment, 18 minutes and 45 seconds. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.